though Jew hatred in its various forms has a long history, the term used commonly today to denote hostility towards Jews is a relatively new one.
When we try to understand the phenomenon of anti-Semitism, it is of course important to deal first with the term itself. When did it emerge and what did it point to, and if we understand it today in the same way that it was understood when it was coined. Now it is very important to remember that when new terms are coined, it's the result of the feelings of people at the time that there is no other word to cover this new phenomenon, new tool can be. So the very fact that a term emerges points for us as historians that something happened. Now we know that the term anti-Semitism emerged in the 1870s, and it was usually attributed to a German journalist, Wilhelm Marr. Apparently it was coined a little bit earlier, but during the 1870s, and it was first used by Wilhelm Marr in a pamphlet that was published in 1879. Now, this points to the fact that something in the 1870s, in Germany at least, there was something new according to the people who coined it, and it was coined by anti-Semites. Now there are three parts in this word, and I think it's important to remember. We have anti, we have Semit, and we have ism, or ismus as it was in German. Anti came as a replacement for hatred. That means that it is apparently less psychological. Semit came instead of Jews and Judaism. This part of Semit, of Semitism, was actually a term which was used at the time and came up within the context of scholarly research in linguistics and Semitic languages. And the assumption was that if there are languages that are different, also the way of thinking and the nature of the people who are talking these languages is different. And therefore, versus Aryan people and Romanian languages, there are Semitic languages and Semitic peoples, and the Semites per se, as they were represented in Europe, were the Jews. So therefore, this replaced the term Jews, but it had to do with racial theories of the time, which also crystallized in the mid-19th century. They perceived themselves as being anti-Jewish, but based on scientific considerations. And that is therefore an expression of the zeitgeist, of the feelings, the spirit of the time. And ism points to the fact that it was interpreted as a school, a movement, an idea, and also an explanation, because we should situate it in a period when we had the emergence of liberalism, socialism, communism, and so on. We have, of course, also academic or intellectual schools, behaviorism, and so on. So anti-Semitism emerges in the context of that period when all kinds of isms emerged, and it is an attempt to give anti-Judaism and anti-Jewishness a more academic, intellectual face, and not as something which is the result of emotions. Now, it is interesting that within a very short time after it was coined, it was taken over by all kinds of anti-Judaisms, also Christian ones and socialist ones and so on. And that raises, of course, the question if we can use the term also for other types of anti-Judaism.
The term anti-Semitism itself, which, as we have seen, was coined in the specific context of the late 19th century in Germany, poses several problems that require elaboration and exploration. To begin with, since the term was coined to present Jew hatred in a more socially legitimate and scientific light, it conceals the fact that the targets of this hatred were actually Jews. Instead, it purports to oppose Semitism, a meaningless term borrowed, as Professor Michman explained, from the realm of linguistics. The self-styled anti-Semites used the word, which was supposed to apply to language use rather than origin, in a racial way. Thus, Semitism referred to an imagined non-existent Semitic race. In addition, this misleading definition of the word makes it sound as if anti-Semitism denotes a hostility against all those speaking Semitic languages, such as Arabic and Amharic. However, from its earliest usages, it was patently clear that anti-Semitism denoted a hatred of the Jews. Beyond this semantic issue, the term anti-Semitism poses additional problems. A major question that arises is whether it is correct to use a word that was coined in the specific context of Europe in the late 19th century when dealing with an apparently wide range of seemingly disparate anti-Jewish feelings, acts, rhetoric, and perceptions. Is it not problematic to use the same term when addressing hostility towards Jews in 1930s Europe and when addressing it in the Middle Ages, permitted to return, though not all did? Let's hear more about this and other problems the usage of the term anti-Semitism may pose.
So the question is, what is the utility of the term anti-Semitism? And there are two kinds of objections to it. The first is that anti-Semitism is a kind of sledgehammer term for something that requires far more detailed, nuanced examination. It doesn't, for example, take into account differences between what might be called rational and irrational hostility towards Jews. It doesn't take into account the immensely varied mutations of irrational hatred towards Jews across millennia and so on. That's one kind of problem. The other kind of problem is that anti-Semitism has a kind of ideological value as a term, and it's enlisted in political arguments in a way which is intended more to sloganize than to neutrally describe realities.
The objections to the use of the term anti-Semitism have generated much scholarly and public debate. There are those who avoid usage of the term completely. Some, instead, use terms such as Judeophobia, Jew hatred, anti-Jewishness, and so forth. There are others who use the term together with a specific adjective in order to differentiate between a variety of time periods, ideologies, cultures, and expressions. Thus, they refer to traditional anti-Semitism, minor anti-Semitism, genocidal anti-Semitism, redemptive anti-Semitism, and racial anti-Semitism, among others. Let's ask ourselves, what is then the utility of the term anti-Semitism when dealing with the history of Jew hatred?
My own view is that the term has continuing utility. People understand what it means, and of course, if it's used without further elaboration, then it can be misused. But to altogether deny access to it, use of it, is to surrender an argument which is very important. And that argument is that Jews are the object of a particularly and specifically irrational hatred, which is of a character which is unusual to them. If we dissolve the term anti-Semitism into a broader term such as racism or the more obscure term heterophobia, hatred of the other, then we lose that historical specificity.
There is a general subject of Jew hatred, and the word anti-Semitism has come to denote that idea of Jew hatred. So essentially, it's more how people understand the term as opposed to what it might intrinsically mean. Jew hatred's changed over the centuries, of course. It's deeply rooted, and it's changed. It's been religious, it's been social, it's had racial ideas in it, political ideas. It's changed, but again, there are some constants to it. And the main constant has always been that the Jew is different from the rest of us, from us. He's the outsider. He's the consummate outsider. I think that's a constant in all of the ideas of Jew hatred. So we can certainly use the term anti-Semitism. We have to understand that it's not the perfect term.